It was the dog's third birthday, which in dog years doesn't matter. Someone made that up, and we just went along with it. Oh, 1 year equals 7 for doggies? Okay.
I love watching movies. You ever rent a movie that was released a while ago and you enjoy it, but there's kind of that awkwardness because you can't talk about it with anyone? You're like, hey, I just saw Heat. Heat, I saw that 6 years ago. I want to talk about it now. No, loser. You ever talk about a movie with someone that read the book? They're always so condescending. The book was much better than the movie. Oh, really? What I enjoyed about the movie? No reading. It only took 2 hours, and then I could take a nap. I'm too lazy. You ever read an article and at the bottom it says continued on page 6? I'm like, not for me. I'm done. Why don't you stop bossing me around? Then I finally get to page 6. I can't even remember what I was reading. You ever read the ending to a different article? Al Gore is running from a waterfall? You ever read a book that changed your life? Me neither. I don't have the attention span. Every now and then I'll read a book. I'll be so proud of myself. I'll try and squeeze it into conversation. People are like, hey, Jim, how you doing? I read a book. 250 pages. That's great. What was it about? No idea. Took me 2 years. You ever buy a book and not read it? You feel almost guilty having it on a bookshelf, don't you? People are like, hey, how was that book? I haven't read it. Did you just buy it? I've had it since high school. Well, can I borrow it? No.
I did figure out what type of doctor I would want to be, which is an anesthesiologist. Because just once, I'd like to walk in a room and go, hi, I'm Dr. Gaffigan. I'm going to give you some drugs so you can't talk or move. And one of these strangers is going to cut you open. Good luck. What draws someone to anesthesiology? It's like, I like medicine, but I really enjoy getting people high. If I can combine the two. I also prefer to sit during surgery. You ever see the anesthesiologist during surgery? They're always sitting there like, I don't even know why I have to be here. Yeah, they're still alive. Anyone got the Wi-Fi password? But I have a newfound respect for doctors, I do. Because when you think about it, unless we're sick, we listen to absolutely nothing doctors tell us. They're like, you should lose weight. Never gonna happen. What else you got? You should exercise. Does eating French fries count? Get out of my office. I don't even listen when I bring my kids to the doctor. The doctor's like, to avoid an infection. I'm like, my wife's like, what'd the doctor say? Don't pick the scab. I don't listen to nerds. That was the only time I would ever see a doctor is when I bring my kids in. Sometimes I'd try and horn in on a pediatric appointment. The doctor would be like, how's little Mikey doing? Mikey's good, he's good. He's a little worried about this mole I have on my arm. Yeah, I explained to Mikey that I've always had the mole, but Mikey thinks it might have changed colors. Jim, would you like to make an appointment? No, it's Mikey. He just needs a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the mole. I know Mikey doesn't want to play the Hippocratic Oath card, but you have to tell us, don't you? I mean, sharing a meal with someone, that's intimacy. That's why it was called the Last Supper and not the last meeting. You know, Jesus was trying to get 12 other guys together. You know, there had to be food there. You know, like, Jesus was like, tomorrow night I want to get everyone together. You know, there was one apostle like, is there going to be food there? Yes, there'll be food. Are we talking appetizers or entrees? It'll be a supper. So casual, I could wear a robe. Are you going to wear a robe? I'll wear a robe if you wear a robe. Jesus, he was in good shape, right? Jesus was in amazing shape, especially considering he could multiply bread whenever he wanted.
Just like, boom, pretzel bread, you know? The Bible doesn't really specify what type of bread it was. Imagine it was pretzel bread, right? It was like, boom, pretzel bread, boom, garlic nuts. Like if right now I multiply garlic nuts up here, you guys would be like, maybe he is God. I know religion jokes make some people uncomfortable, especially the ones going to hell. You ever get a phone call? That's annoying, right? You better be calling to tell me your hands are chopped off. It's like, I just wanted to hear your voice, Daddy. Buy my CD, right? Recently, I was invited to a surprise birthday party. It was a surprise birthday party for a dog. That's right, I have friends that are mentally ill. I went. It was in my apartment building, and I needed the material. And to be fair, the dog was surprised. Didn't suspect a thing. Dog didn't know it was his birthday. The dog didn't know it had a birthday. The dog wasn't sure why people were in the apartment. It was the dog's third birthday, which in dog years doesn't matter. Someone made that up, and we just went along with it. Oh, 1 year equals 7 for doggies? Okay. When I see a dog, I'll do math. That's not fulfilling some dog need. You know, there's not a dog sitting in a bar right now going, I'm not 3, I'm 21. I can legally drink. That's not how dogs keep track of time. If you have a dog, you know they don't keep track of time. You've left your home, forgotten something, walked back in, only to be greeted by your dog like you've just returned from war.